Hello everyone and welcome to our final presentation. We're super excited to present to you our final project, which we've been working on the last semester, and we've done the supplier performance evaluation project at Nova Procurement and are super excited to show you some insights today. So what we will cover today is basically give you a quick introduction about the project, then go into the detail with the VCW framework, and then show you the different phases which we covered, and then give you the next steps of our project. So starting off with the introduction. This is our amazing team which we've been working on together. So apart from me, also Lea, Ursa, Tomasz, Flor and Julien have been working on the project, and we're super excited to present to you our final presentation now and giving you a little bit of a background of the situation. So Nova SBE currently has no supplier performance evaluation in place, and we basically designed a custom dashboard where we can reduce costs in long term and increase efficiencies for Nova Procurement. And basically the problem can be identified as following. How can we improve the quality of Nova SBE's procurement process based on supplier performance evaluation? And that problem is really based on three key issues. So first, there's no supplier performance evaluation at Nova SBE currently. And second, there are limited resources in the procurement department. But third, Nova SBE wants to become a leading business school in Europe, and procurement and services at Nova SBE are of course part of that journey. So identifying and creating a solution is really key to fulfilling this vision. So we now identified the solution and prototyped a custom designed dashboard solution which combines different supplier performance components to ensure comprehensive supplier evaluation and two-way communication between Nova Procurement and the suppliers. And then we also have required resources. So for example, money. We would need around 7,000 euros to complete the project in the first year of the project. But we have limited resources. So we have a limited manpower of only one procurement expert and one IT expert. And we structured the minute into 3 phases and already done the first one. So the conceptualization of the solution is now already done by us. And we would now go into the second phase of the project, which would be the creation and implementation. And then third, the integration into daily operations, while we have a time frame of less than 12 months for this project. Now getting a little bit more into detail about supplier performance evaluation, which is an important component of an effective supply chain. Here on the left, you can see the different components of supply chain management. So for example, from transportation to logistics to relationship and partnership and supplier management. There's really a lot to cover in this good supply chain, and supplier management is really part of that. And supplier management can basically be defined into 3 main activities. So first, the supplier selection, second, the supplier evaluation, and third, the supplier relationship. And we now had a look into more detail into supplier performance management, which is basically built on different factors which need to be identified in order to have a good performance evaluation of the supplier. So for example, cost, communication of expectations, risk mitigation, improvement of supplier quality, benchmarking of suppliers, and then of course above all the two-way communication between Nova Procurement and the suppliers. Let's now show you the VCW framework, which we included in our project. We use the VCW framework to structure our project and create value for Nova SBE, and the VCW framework has basically 5 steps. So from the define phase to increase, to assess, to narrow, and to act, we basically went through these 5 stages and will now go into detail into each of the phases, starting off with Lea with the first phase.
Thank you, John. Now I would like to dive a bit deeper into phase 1, discover value. So what did we actually do in phase one? So first of all, we started with an external and internal analysis. Afterwards, we defined the challenge together with our KDM, and finally, we also came up with the expected KPIs for our project as well for us as a team. To get a better understanding in which kind of environment Nova Procurement actually operates, we did both internal as well as external analysis. And for the internal part, we did a TAOS analysis, and we also looked at the internal capabilities of Nova Procurement. For the external part, we did a PESTEL analysis as well as Porter's 5 forces, and also took a closer look at the competitors. So let's start with the internal analysis then. So here we will start with the TAOS. So as a first internal analysis, we actually conducted a TAOS, and we found out that the mini-maxi strategy would be a good opportunity to utilize technology and simultaneously increase efficiency. So right now there's no system or technology at Nova SBE Procurement in place. However, these technologies or systems exist on the market and could potentially lead to cost savings in long term, and also could handle the gap of limited resources which currently exists at the procurement department at Nova, as there's only one employee responsible for all the procurement tasks. To identify whether Nova Procurement is actually internally capable to optimize their procurement process, we took a look at internal capabilities, and 4 of them stood out. So first of all, currently there is already the organizational structure in place, especially from an IT landscape perspective, to optimize the procurement system. Moreover, Nova already built a long-term partnerships with multiple suppliers, which is actually a great base to further expand their supplier network. Moreover, the procurement team. So right now the procurement team only consists out of 1 employee, which actually makes it relatively simple as there's only 1 decision maker. And moreover, the mindset. So Nova-wide, there's actually the willingness to further improve supplier quality, not only in the procurement department, but also from other decision makers at Nova. Now we will move on to the external analysis part. So to get a better understanding of the external environment in which Nova SBE Procurement actually operates, we did a PESTEL analysis, and we found out that all of the different factors actually influence the supplier evaluation. So let's start with the political aspects. So there's always a high dependence on legal frameworks. Moreover, from an economical perspective, economic conditions such as inflation, they change the tuition fees for the students, and that also means that the budget for the procurement department might actually change. Moreover, the changes in demographics. But the most important point we actually considered are the technological improvements related to procurement, either by looking at e-procurement or digital supply chains. And moreover, we shouldn't forget that Nova SBE is a public institution, which means that there are actually specific procurement-related laws and regulations in place. And finally, the environmental aspect, which is actually procurement and sustainability go hand in hand, and this factor should also be considered when evaluating suppliers. So additionally to the PESTEL, we also conducted a Porter's 5 forces analysis, and we actually found out that Nova SBE is in a quite strong position. However, there's additional room for improvement. So taking a look at the different forces, we can actually see that the bargaining power of the buyer is relatively high. So Nova SBE is a relatively large buyer, so they usually buy like high volumes, which actually means that they have the power to negotiate better prices and better terms and conditions. Moreover, the bargaining power of suppliers is moderate, as well as the competition. Looking at the threat of substitutes and the threat of new entrants, both of these forces are relatively low. Taking a closer look to the threats of new entrants, we want to emphasize here that procurement departments across universities are highly specialized, which actually means that this threat is relatively low here. So additionally to the PASTA and the POTUS 5 forces, we also take a look at the competitors of Nova SBE, which are the top European business schools. And what you can see here is that we picked out 6 out of them and then did research based on 5 different dimensions. So we actually looked whether there's a SAP or ERP system for the procurement in place, whether they are currently using a template for the supply evaluation, whether they focus on sustainable procurement, if they have a procurement website in place either for suppliers or for internal employees, or in the best case for both. And we also looked at the fact if they're using public tools for quotes, which is also quite common in the public institution sector. And we demonstrated that here in this graph. So on the y-axis you can actually see the business school ranking of the Financial Times, which is published annually, and on the x-axis you can see the quality of their procurement system which they currently have. And you can see that for Nova there's actually quite some room for improvement. So the light blue box actually demonstrates the desired future status for Nova. And that's also what the goal of our project should be. So once the quality of the procurement system increases, there will be for sure also an improvement in the overall business school ranking. So as outlined before, we also took a deeper look at sustainable procurement as one of the dimensions for the competitor analysis. And sustainable procurement actually means that the sustainability aspect is included in procurement requirements, contract specifications, but also evaluation criteria. So suppliers are not only measured based on their performance, but also like how they include sustainability aspects in their service or in their production processes, for example. So as you probably recognized in the graph we showed beforehand, LSE was the leader among all procurement systems. And why this is the case? So 2 of the aspects they do pretty well is how they set up actually their procurement website. So they have 2 different websites in place. So one is for internal usage and one is for the supplier usage. And what you can see here is the structure of these websites and what is the purpose of these websites. So why they implement them is actually because people that are in contact with the procurement department, they get access to all the information they need. They can download documents, they can download templates, and of course, in case there are questions, they can always contact the procurement department. However, a lot of questions are already answered beforehand, which actually saves the procurement department a lot of time here. So now at this stage, we have a better understanding of the internal and external environment in which Nova SBE Procurement operates. And therefore, we are ready to define the challenge. And that's what we did together with our KDM. So together with our KDM vendor, we actually did a focus interview to get a better understanding of Nova SBE Procurement. And based on the findings and all of our other analysis, we came up with a challenge together with her. So how can we improve the quality of Nova SBE Procurement process based on supplier performance measurement and evaluation? And now I will give the word to Tomasz.
Thanks, Leah. So now we'll go over the key performance indicators. Our key decision maker is Vanda Veríssimo, and Nova SBE's mission is to provide world-class teaching, research, and public services in the field of business and economics to promote and develop a competitive, innovative, and sustainable economy. Its vision is to be a leading business and economic school that is internationally acknowledged for the excellence of its teaching, research, and public service. Nova also aims to create and maintain a culture of excellence and innovation based on the principles of respect, integrity, collaboration, and responsibilities. So, by reflecting on the mission, vision, and values of Nova SBE and the involvement of the KDM, we defined 3 project deliverables. The first one was to create an internal questionnaire about supplier performance. The second one was to define supplier KPIs per acquisition type, and the third one was to create a model that could measure supplier performance and generate a report for suppliers. We also defined and ranked some short-term and long-term project KPIs and also team-related KPIs. We'll go over the most important ones. So in the short-term KPIs, we had the development of a technical feasible solution for procurement department, the involvement of 4 different stakeholders, and also the creation of a 2-way communication. On the long term, we had the objective to enhance Nova's reputation by meeting customer and supplier requirements and to increase time and cost efficiency. Finally, on the team-related KPIs, all of them were important. So the KPIs were to understand the value creation wheel framework and to manage successful application of it, to ensure an effective team dynamic and collaboration, and also the overall satisfaction with the final project outcome. To better show our stakeholder involvement, we created a timeline with the 5 different phases of the value creation wheel framework. And obviously the KDM was always involved from start to finish. But on the contrary, the suppliers and the Nova IT department were only involved in the first phase and in the last one. The students were only involved in the second phase, and the other Nova faculties that we also contacted were only involved in phase 3 of the project. Now, based on the KPIs, we established specific objectives, which we divided in 2 types, team-related and project-related. The team-related objectives were to improve teamwork and collaboration and to apply the VCW framework effectively. And the project-related were to improve the communication between suppliers and Nova SBE's procurement department, to eliminate unnecessary costs and lead time, and also to improve the supply quality and Nova's reputation.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the phase 2 of the value creation wheel, which is creating value. In phase 2, we generated multiple IDs and criteria using the primary and secondary data. Also, phase 2 is divided in 3 parts: the IDs, the criteria, and the purification of concepts. So the IDs that we generated are the potential solutions. In order to generate IDs, we used primary and secondary data. So the primary data was brainstorming with our group. Secondly, it was the Nova student survey that we conducted, and also the Nova faculty survey that we did. And lastly, it was the focus interview with key decision maker. And then we also had the secondary data, which was the research paper, databases, and the competitor website. I'm now going to talk about the primary data that we generated next to the brainstorming that we did with our group. One of the primary data that we used was generated with the student survey. For around 76% of the students that answered the survey, sustainability is important regarding facilities and services at the school. And around 80% of the student is satisfied in general with the facilities and services. And around 50% of the students answered that issues with the facilities and services at Nova are fixed quickly. So overall, the student survey concluded that there is a high satisfaction with the facilities and the services at Nova, but there is still a lot of improvement for both the facilities and the services. The second primary data that we generated was from Nova faculty surveys. We wanted to identify potential opportunities for sharing the best supplier evaluation practices and improve supplier rating criteria by basing scores on comparison with benchmarking. So we initially contacted 4 Nova faculties, and the answers confirmed our assumptions that currently supplier evaluation is performed to a limited extent, and there are no official practices and systems that are guiding the evaluation of them. But faculty procurement departments did, however, express the willingness to collaborate on supplier performance evaluations. The last thing that we did was conducting an interview with the key decision maker to identify and evaluate the supplier evaluation method in place. So we identified many shortcomings of the current process and several important aspects that are not objectively considered. So we had 2 main takeaways of the interview that we did. The first one is that the key decision maker provides a team with mandatory requirements and some good to have criteria which need to be considered in the final solution that we provide. And the second takeaway is that we acknowledge the solution required commitment by multiple parties, and that the lack of knowledge of supplier evaluation criteria can lead to inconsistency in performing the performance analysis. So based on the interview findings, we identified 4 potential solution components. The first one is allowing for changes in weights of the applied criteria. Then also allowing attribution of rating to the categories. Then also present a final value that represents supplier performance. And lastly, allowing for further comments in each section. So thank you. This was everything for the primary data, and now we're going to the...
Thank you, Flor. Now we'll talk about the secondary data. Using secondary data, we found existing procurement frameworks and solutions which were used during the idea generation process. We explored secondary data via universities, what they were doing in the procurement department. For an example, one is the high automation in procurement, meaning that the supplier performance measurement application that can integrate and generate output faster. That's inside the university best practice. And also inside the quality management principles, we can see that another tool that can be used is the engagement of people that enables self-evaluation process based on personal objectives. We also explored supplier relationship management and joint procurement, benchmarking both of them. After all this data were gathered, we created some filters. We created 18 potential filters to be used to facilitate the process of selecting ideas. They were carefully thought out and developed as a group. An example of that is the implementation cost, which means the cost of implementing this certain idea. Another one is the human capital, how many humans will take to do a certain tasks. Another is feasibility, how feasible this idea is. These were all considered, and later they will be ranked and judged to just facilitate and generate the best idea to our project. Thank you. Now John will proceed with the presentation.
Let's now have a look into our third phase, validate value. So after we generated the ideas, criteria, and filter, we will now assess them with our KDM and rank and weigh them. So let's start off with the selected ideas. All of our initial 23 generated ideas were used and clustered into 3 areas that need to be included in our final solution. The 3 clusters are internal evaluation ideas, performance management ideas, and relationship management ideas. And after a discussion with our KDM, we decided to first evaluate individual components and include them afterwards into a system solution. To avoid any pre-selection, we continued with the evaluation of all generated ideas. Let's go into the selection of the filters. We use the poker method to classify our filters and validate our idea by involving our key decision maker, Vanda. We basically use this approach to kill some ideas, review some ideas, multiply them, or keep them. Kill basically means that the filters will be eliminated. Review means that the filters will be reconsidered. Multiply means that the filters should be divided or paired with others. And keep means that there's nothing wrong with the filter and it adds value to our analysis. We basically killed 3 filters, multiplied 1, and kept 11 filters. The reasoning behind the selection of the filters were basically that we had a democratic and collaborative process, and basically we killed them if someone believed that it doesn't add a value to our analysis, so either us or the KDM, or we would see similar filters that we believed would be more relevant, or if we couldn't find any concrete information on them. So let's now go into detail which we kept and which we killed. So of the 11 filters from the poker methods which we were selected, were then used for the value creation funnel, and here you can have a look at them. So the light gray ones are those we killed, the green ones are the filters which we multiplied, and the blue ones are which we kept. And in total we have 11 potential filters. Each filter has been defined to get a better understanding and to apply the value creation funnel effectively. And let's now go into detail about 1 or 2. So maybe let's look at human capital, where basically we can see that measures how many people are needed for the setup, maintenance, and development of a system. And let's maybe go also into scalability, which is our point 10, which basically defines whether an expansion to other Nova faculties is possible. So here you can have a look at the different filters and what they basically mean. Let's now go into the ranking of the filters. For the ranking of the filters, we also have a rationale. So the individual reasonings were then used to rank the 11 filters for the value creation funnel. And let's maybe also go here into a little bit of detail into some of the selected. So for example, for human capital, number 2, as human resources are specially tight at Nova SBE's procurement department, this filter defines basically the scope of ideas which are feasible for the procurement department. And now let's also have a look at our other example, scalability 10, which basically describes that the filter was ranked when we have the possibility to expand the system to other Nova faculties, but first acceptance and implementation needs to be successful within Nova SBE. That's why human capital is more important to us and was ranked with 2, and scalability was ranked with 10. And you can now have a look into the other ones in more detail if you want to as well.
So after validating value in phase 3, I'm now going to walk you through the 4th phase of the value creation wheel. The first step of phase 4 focused on the value creation funnel and applying the filters from the previous stage in order to narrow our ideas, as well as applying the multi-criteria decision analysis to come up with a complete concept of our idea and finally design a prototype of our solution. Diving deeper, let me first present to you how we applied the value creation funnel. So we began with a total of 23 ideas, which were clustered together based on the number of components that are necessary for implementation of our final solution. We filtered each of those ideas through 11 filters that were mostly based on the 3 M's. As you can see from the graphic, majority of the ideas were not cost-effective or required too much human capital in their implementation or use. The two ideas that then made it to the last filter of adaptability were the performance scorecard using Excel and the KPI software. But due to the changing environment and the needs of Nova SBE Procurement Department, adaptability was actually an important filter, which at last eliminated the idea of a KPI software. The performance scorecard using Excel allows for much cheaper and faster adaptation of parameters and variables that are evaluated and can also be easily updated given the need. So to further validate the results of value creation funnel, we also applied the multi-criteria decision analysis. And our idea of performance evaluation scorecard again passed all the filters and was thereafter considered the main component of our final solution. As already mentioned, while the idea of a KPI software was quite inviting, it nevertheless failed in the aspect of adaptability and was also quite time and cost intensive. So after we've identified and validated the performance scorecard as our final solution, we then turned to the development of a complete concept of supplier performance evaluation and also came up with a prototype of our final solution. As briefly implied previously, the supplier evaluation form is a core element, but it is only one step in the supplier evaluation process. Our complete solution consists of 6 steps, which together ensure a comprehensive evaluation of supplier performance and also provide an opportunity for relationship building between the suppliers and the Nova SBE Procurement Department. So the first step is about evaluation of supplier performance using the Excel form that is available through the dashboard that will be presented shortly. In tandem, the supplier self-evaluation surveys should also be sent to the suppliers via email, and both of these forms will also be presented in detail later on. The answers of the survey sent to the suppliers are also automatically recorded back into the dashboard. After both the internal and external, so the supplier self-assessment, are completed, the data from both evaluations are compared to ensure consistency and identify any potential biases or contradiction in the evaluation process. This allows not only for coherency in the results, but also serves as a midpoint of the evaluation process and allows for continuous communication between both parties. In the fourth step, the supplier evaluation can then be manually selected for the content of the final supplier performance report. So information can be added for benchmarking purposes or include any additional comments that might be relevant for the supplier. And once the final report is generated, it is then communicated to the supplier via email. The email to the suppliers should also include a comment box so that any comments from the supplier in relation to the report can then be directly fed into the system and be visible on the supplier dashboard. So to make this information more easily understandable, let me present to you our final prototype. So what you can see here is the primary dashboard of our system, which contains basic and all the fundamental information for anyone performing the evaluation. So on the right-hand side, the dashboard displays categories of documents that are meant to guide anyone engaging with the procurement department or its operations. So first and foremost, these documents should include guidelines on how to perform the supplier evaluation, but also other information in relation to purchasing and ordering products or services. The main purpose of this is to reduce the amount of back and forth communication between our key decision maker or the procurement department and anyone else engaging with purchasing within Nova. On the left side of the dashboard, there's a complete list of suppliers, and by clicking on a supplier name, their evaluation profile should pop up. So each evaluation profile should look something like this and display all relevant information regarding the supplier and the evaluation process. First, the banner should display all relevant contact information, and the rest of the profile should kind of be divided into 3 main features. The supplier evaluation part lists whomever is responsible for performing evaluation in Nova and what is their status. So whether they have already completed the evaluation or if the evaluation is still in progress. It should also include a timeline and a due date by which the evaluation should be completed. The supplier self-evaluation status should report on similar variables. It should first state whether the self-assessment form has already been emailed to the supplier, when was the deadline, and whether the supplier has already submitted the answer, or if the email should be sent again, or if the evaluator should follow up in some other way. And lastly, the evaluation score part should present a brief summary of the evaluation results, including the evaluation scores through various evaluation periods to quickly see the trend in the evaluations performed. So first, taking a deep dive into the internal evaluation form. By clicking on the Start Supplier Evaluation button, the Excel evaluation form should appear. This internal supplier evaluation template has multiple assessment criteria, and it's based on 7 categories. So quality, costs, financial position of the supplier, delivery, communication, account management, and any other relevant variables that might vary from supplier to supplier. Each of those items should be evaluated and is assigned a specific weight, and the extent of consideration under each item is also explained to ensure the clarity and consistency in evaluation, especially when it is performed by different evaluators. Each item is then assigned a score between 1 and 5. And aggregated, the final score is then displayed also on the primary dashboard as seen before, and the outcome is categorized as not good, acceptable, good, or very good to offer some indication of performance at a first glance. The second important form is the evaluation that should be performed by the suppliers themselves. As explained before, the purpose is to encourage a two-way communication and ensure that the evaluation results are coherent. It also allows for the suppliers to reflect on their own performance and provide valuable feedback to Nova SBE. The performance mostly focuses on communication, their relationship with Nova SBE, as well as their own performance assessment. So the final part of our prototype is then the report dashboard, which displays detailed evaluation scores and combines the results of supplier self-assessment survey as well as the internal evaluation by Nova SBE Procurement. By clicking on the graphs, the evaluator is also able to customize the report by selecting the KPIs they would like to display, including benchmarking either with other suppliers or with evaluation results from previous periods. A comment section is also available to include any final thoughts. And when all the components of the report have been selected, click on the green button, then generates the final performance report, which should be communicated to the suppliers via email.
Let's now wrap up the VCW framework with the 5th phase, Consolidate Value. So in phase 5, we validated the 3 M's and the business model with the KDM and tested and evaluated our KPIs and basically assessed the impact of our solution. Let's now have a look into the value proposition. So here you can have an overview of our value proposition on the left and the customer profile of Nova Procurement on the right. So our value proposition is that we reduce the pains and increase the gains of Nova SBE's procurement department. Let's now have a look into this in more detail. So basically our value proposition is our product, which is in the middle, the custom procurement dashboard, which includes 3 components: the internal evaluation process, the performance management tool, and the relationship management tool. And we basically create gain with enabling supplier performance evaluation, which you can see on top, which basically helps Nova SBE to execute tasks and also for other faculties. And the pain relievers which we provide is basically the easy to use service of our dashboard, which is really intuitive and enables relationship management. On the right, you can now have a look into the customer profile of Nova Procurement, which basically shows the gains, pains, and customer jobs. And the gains are that they basically have an easy procurement process, which reduces time and creates value. The customer job that needs to be done is that they need to run, of course, the procurement department and are responsible for services and facilities at Nova SBE. And the pains are that they have a vast variety of criteria which they need to evaluate the suppliers on. Let's now have a look into the 3 M's. So here you have a quick overview, and then we will go into a deep dive for each of the 3 M's. So here you have the manpower, the minute, and the money. And you can see that manpower is really limited, so we only need 2 people, but which have really important tasks such as creating the dashboard, onboarding suppliers, and onboarding Nova employees. And for minute of a project, we have a 3-step methodology: conceptualization of solution, which we've now done, then the creation and implementation, which needs to be done in the next step, and then the integration into daily operations. And for money, we will now also have a look into a deep dive to basically see how we calculated the needed money of 7,190 euro. So here basically you have the manpower again and the money. So the manpower is divided into 2 people. So an IT expert, which basically includes our solutions, so such as the dashboard, the maintenance, and also that they should brief the procurement department to use our solution efficiently. And then we also have, of course, the procurement specialist, which works in the procurement department. And here we basically need some briefing for the suppliers that they also self-evaluate themselves. Then we need the briefing of other Nova employees, which might use the dashboard, and then also analyze the data and take action if something needs to happen for the supplier. And then on the right, you can see the money, which basically is 7,190 euro for our project, which is divided into 3 aspects. So first, the setup cost of the dashboard, which would be a simple software, which would cost 1,000 euro. Then the implementation and maintenance cost, which would be 10% of work per week for this project of the IT support, and that would basically be 3,320 euro. And then the procurement specialist, which would also be working on the project for 1 week, and that would basically be 2,870 euro, which totals up into 7,190 euro. And now let's have a look into the 3 M's and basically what needs to happen, which we will go then into the next steps. So on the left, you can see this conceptualization, which we've already done in our project and which you saw in phase 4. Then next step will be the creation and implementation into the Nova SBE's IT landscape. And third, you can see the integration, which basically would be that they use it in their daily operations, collect feedbacks, and basically implement it into their procurement process. So now let's wrap up with the next steps.
So thank you, John. Now I will move on to the business model. So our project was not really setting up a business. It was more like optimizing a process which is currently in place. And therefore you cannot find all the components of the Canvas business model. However, we picked out the most important ones for us and also added the scalability aspect. So let's move on to the key partners. So we have 3 different key partners in place. So the suppliers, other Nova departments, and also other Nova faculties, which come later in the process or become later more important in the process. Then we have key activities from a procurement perspective. So first of all, we have the coordination of the correct application of our dashboard solution. Then we have analyzing the data of the dashboard and the report and so on. Then we have the selection of the best suppliers, and in the end, which is more like a long-term activity, we have the building partnerships with the suppliers. To do so, two different key resources are required. So first of all, there's a procurement specialist which is required, and also an IT expert to cover the technical aspects that are related to implementing and maintaining the dashboard. So what is actually the value proposition of our project? So first of all, we enable supplier performance evaluation. We create a customized procurement dashboard, and our solution is easy to use. And what costs come with this solution? So there are personal costs related to the procurement specialist and the IT expert, but also setup costs related to the dashboard. And the last aspect we would like to emphasize here is the scalability option or opportunity of our project. So first of all, the dashboard will be implemented at Nova SBE. Then in the second step, the dashboard will be implemented to one other Nova faculty. And then afterwards, we will roll it out to all the other Nova faculties. And doing so will actually lead to a massive scaling effect. So moving on to the KPIs we established in the beginning of our presentation. So taking a look at them, we actually see that we reached most of our short-term project KPIs. However, for the assessment of the long-term KPIs, it's still too early. So as the solution is not implemented right now, we cannot see if there are any increases in time and cost efficiency, for example. So therefore, to assess the long-term KPIs, it's still we still need to wait for the next implementation phase. And then the last aspect of our agenda for today are next steps. So what are the next steps and how do we want to continue with our project? So what are the next steps? So right now we created the prototype and conceptualized it. In the next step, the implementation of the dashboard solution will take place, and then finally the integration. And if all the steps are completed successfully, we can also assess the impact of our project. And looking into the future, like if the project is successfully implemented, we actually think that there's an improvement in the quality, performance of suppliers. They will be cost and time savings, and also well-established partnerships with the suppliers, as there's a two-way communication in this place. So at this stage, we would like to say thank you for your attention, and especially thank you again to our KDM vendor who supported us during the whole process. We are really happy with the outcome, and in case you have further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you. Bye.